We're now going to be taking a look at Chapter 8. This is actually going to be a pretty brief lecture because you can see there's only 18 slides here. The focus of this is working with tables. Tables are an HTML structure that have been around basically since the beginning of HTML. The point of a table really is to simulate what we would do in something like Excel. Basically in Excel, the whole concept is you have rows and columns and you can put stuff in there. And really, when tables were developed, the whole point was to have that sort of a mechanism on an HTML page. So you can organize information and make it nice and neat, associate certain things with each other. So here's an example of what an HTML table looks like in its raw HTML form. Without any styles applied, you create a table, this is what it will look like. And you will have, as I indicated, columns and rows. Okay, spreadsheet-like. Now, there's a bunch of different tags that we use. This is just a hint as to some of them, but these are, I would say, the top three here are the crucial ones. First, you need a table tag that encapsulates the whole structure, and then you have TRs and TDs. TR stands for table row, and TD stands for table data. So there's no column tag, but there's a row tag. So somebody made the decision to do that, so don't ask me why. And then there's also the caption tag, and in my mind, it's kind of an optional thing, honestly, but it does allow you to add a little bit of annotation to a table, which can be handy. You can also add that to the bottom. It doesn't have to be at the top. All right, so let's take a look at some example code here. This is an example of how you do this. So you have that table tag that sits around the whole structure, and then you have rows defined. So you see you got a TR and a TR. That's the beginning and ending of a row, and we have two columns, so then we have two TDs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start myself a new HTML document here. I have Dreamweaver up and running. I'm just going to create a new page. I'm just using this because the creation process is quick, basically, so you've got a page there. And then products like Dreamweaver, and this might be one of those things that makes you want to get it, is you have this little insert, right? And you click table, and it says how many rows and columns do you want? 3 rows, 3 columns, that works for me. How wide do you want it? How thick do you want the border? Click OK, kaboom, you got the structure. Now one thing that you want to notice here is, first of all, that whenever you're going to have 3 columns and you want this to appear consistently, you have to have the same number of data cells in each row in order for it to render correctly. If I mistakenly delete one, it kind of breaks. Alright, so I'm going to put it back. The border being defined here, this is a HTML element. Isn't that interesting? The borders still show. And the width as well. That's an attribute that goes to the table. Now that looks pretty ugly. That's why they have you put it in, right? And then the border, it goes in there well. Now these are useful when you're building tables so that you can see where your table is and what size it is roughly. But when you're going to control things like border and sizing and all that kind of stuff, you're better off doing it in CSS. General rule of thumb. With old HTML, this was the only way we could control a table, was like this, so that's what we did. And they still work, but it's not recommended. You're better off using CSS in general. All right, let's go back to the slideshow. This next example, they throw in an additional tag called the TH, which is a table header tag. And in fact, if we want, we could actually kind of copy this. It should paste in okay. Except we're going to need another one of these because we have 3 columns. This is only 2. So as with the table rows or table data cells, you need to have the same number of these as you do columns for it to work. And you see one thing that it does automatically is because it's identified as a header, it makes it bold. Okay, so that's kind of a nice little thing, something you might opt to use. Are you noticing that they're using an additional tag here that we're not using in the book? At least not yet. Table body. That's not really necessarily required, but it can be a kind of a helpful little thing. So just a little bit different approach. Some of the things that you can add as attributes, and we saw already border and width, right? And those are two of the ones that are listed here. Notice though, obsolete. This is from the freshest version of the textbook. So you can, I want to be clear on this, you can still use it. So if you grab old HTML code and drop in these attributes, you can be pretty safely assured it's still going to work. But it's considered obsolete. Obsolete does not mean deprecated. That does not mean it won't work at all. It's just, basically they're telling you, instead of using BG color, you should really use CSS and say background color. So keep that in mind. Border is one that does work, and really border has its place, mostly so you can see where the borders fall when you're working. And sometimes what you'll do is you'll say border equals 1, just so you can see where stuff ends and finishes, because it's not always going to fall into nice little columns like this in terms of the stuff that's inside of there. Because some of them might be blank, some might contain an image, who knows. So it's just kind of nice. Some things that are attributes, well, I guess we're just kind of continuing this list here of obsolete things. We can do alignments with vertical alignments, heights, widths. Those would all be things that would be placed in the tag, so like you see right there. Ones that are still used are column span and row span, because there's really no other way to accomplish them without doing that, and I'll show you what those do. Alright, so I'm trying to Alt-tab my way back to Dreamweaver, and for whatever reason it's not letting me, so I gotta mouse it. But a row and a column span would be like what they're showing you. So for example, if I wanted to get rid of those two table cells, you know, I have breaks, right? Really what I want is this box to extend all the way across. So then in this tag here, am I spanning columns or am I spanning rows? Column. Totally the opposite of what you think, right? We're spanning, how many columns? 2 columns? Nope. 3 columns. You see it change at the top. And then here you can, you know, type in some text and it'll pop up there. So we're getting rid of 2 things in the row, but we need it to span across the columns. Now you can do the same thing vertically. So for example, and this takes a little bit more planning, if I eliminate one of these from each one of these rows, then I tell this first one that we're going to do a row span, and we're going to do 2. Just got to finish typing it in. That work? Apparently not. Uh-oh, help. What do I do? Well, let's figure it out. Right, here's an example of the column span. That's the one we already did. But here's a row span. That should have worked, except I put it in the wrong spot. See? You guys caught me making my one mistake for the year. How many rows? 2? I'm going to guess that's not what you predicted. Really what this is telling us is that we need one more of these, right? Oh my God, did we break it? See, did you see what just happened there? This is a wonderful example of like something that you might totally miss. That was all it took to break it. Broke it. It's late. Row span, column spans. Now, you might not do a lot of work with tables, mind you, but tables are kind of interesting because they've been around for a long time, and although you can use them to do like spreadsheet-like information, they have other uses aside from that. And there was kind of a historic use of tables to control layout. Like a lot of the stuff that you guys are learning how to do with floats and margins and padding and all that kind of stuff, and you're struggling with it. The thing about tables that's really cool is they always work. So when we were trying to do like layouts and CSS was not reliable, or in some cases non-existent, and we wanted to get stuff into a page in rows and columns, like we wanted a 3-column layout, we could just lay it out on the table. I could just say, you know, first row be this width. So for example, if I took this column here and I could just say width, and this is kind of interesting, my quotes, and say 300. Well, it doesn't seem quite like 3. Oh, I see the problem. We have this column span here. Let's get rid of that. I'm getting rid of the row and column spans right now. And we got a row span. We'll get rid of that. Put another one here. Okay, now we're back to normal. And it still didn't work. Can't make something 300 when the table's only 200. So basically what I'm showing you here is that people use tables for layouts because they could very predictably create shapes and sizes and put stuff into it and have it perform consistently across all browsers. So for whatever reason, browsers always displayed tables correctly. So really up until, you know, CSS version 2, browsers were inconsistent, CSS was inconsistent. You wanted to get a layout a certain way, people often went to tables as an approach for doing layouts just because it worked. Some people still use it. Not really my preference, but there are those that... No, it's not recommended. But it does work. All right, so some of the preferences here are that you use CSS to control a lot of the attributes that we were just looking at. And here are some of the ones that pre-existed and the replacements in CSS. A lot of them are exactly what you think they would be. Width is width and height is height. Background color, very much the same techniques that you're applying. The thing to remember is every time you have a little table data cell or a TH cell, you can pretty much put inside there anything you would put inside of any other HTML element. In a sense, it's almost like a little micro page. So you can do you can put a background on it, you can color it, you can border it, you can padding it, whatever you can think of, you can do it inside that space. So don't hesitate to try. One real neat little thing that you can also do is some more introduction to some advanced CSS techniques are some additional pseudo classes. These are a little bit complicated initially when you learn them. Those of you that are, depending on what track you're in, you will learn more about these. Like my SharePoint people, you guys will learn about this in Web 2. Regular web people will learn more about it in the JavaScript classes, the jQuery classes. There's a whole smattering of them. But basically, the same way that we added like hover to the anchor tag, we add these pseudo classes. And notice what it says here. It says first of type. So it says applies to the first element of the specified type. So what they're going to show us in this next slide, for example, is let's say you're looking at applying something to the first table data cell within a table row. So the first instance of TD, you can apply a specific style to it and not apply it to any of the rest. That's kind of weird, right? So you might think to yourself, maybe for the very first row, first TR tag, the background could be, green. And I could just say TR colon first of type curly's background red, or whatever the color is. None of the other TRs would have it. Just the first of that type. Then you can add some of these other ones. These are kind of weird too. First child. So if I applied something to a TR tag like this, and then I said the first child, that would be this. First element inside of it, because this is it sits inside of a TR, so that's the parent element, and it goes all the way through. The TD is the first child element. So I could say TR colon first child and apply a style, and it will only apply to that first TD inside there. I know these are kind of weird. Like, why on earth would I do that? Can I just put a class on it or ID and just style it? There's some advantages though, because you can actually generically create HTML without any classes, IDs, just straight HTML, and then just using logic, style a table, or really any HTML element using these pseudo selectors. It just takes a little bit of planning. So you did first of type, you can also do last of type, first child, last child, or the super flexible nth of type, where I can say even numbered ones, the fifth one. I could even put mathematical formulas in there. The fifth one minus 2. There's really complicated little things you can do. And it's not my goal to try to teach you this. I could spend a whole evening teaching you this to the point where you got it, but we're introducing it. The reason that they're introducing it is what they're trying to do is to get you to do something like this, where you're going to be styling maybe the first and the last row a separate way, and then you might write some CSS that allows you to do that. So in this case, if this was a TR tag, I might say first of type, last of type, gray background. And I wouldn't have to give it a class or an ID. I see the glazed over look. I know it's kind of weird. But in your exercises, when you work on it, you'll get to play with it a little bit and you'll see how it works. All right, folks, that ends this lecture. That was really quick. I like it.